also had her last year for kindergarten.
Really?
Yeah, so
That's the one that moved.
yeah, so like a third of the class with her.
That's very lucky.
Yeah.
All right, can I get everybody's attention, please? Is this too loud? No. So no. So when everyone's finished, please feel free to finish your food and relax and enjoy and your drinks. You can't hear me. Okay, I'll try to.
Why don't you turn the
I'm gonna turn the
amplifier that way?
All right, is that a little better? Thanks. If it's too loud, please tell me. Thank you for coming tonight to the 32nd Annual Candidates Forum. I think it's the 32nd year of the Village Incorporation, so I think there's been 32 of these, but don't hold me to that back. On behalf of myself, Steve Trorn, Marty Langela, and Lauren Schwader-Beal, did I get that right? Perfectly. Naomi Nyerman, and Natalie Wells, who's not here tonight with us. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to start off tonight by first thanking the 3 candidates we have for our 2 Village Council spots this year. On my left, your left as well, is Katie Phillip Howard, Katya Hill in the middle, and Richard Krajik with a C on the right. And the way we're going to run this tonight is we're going to have a series of questions. If there are questions from the field, we'd like to get them in the basket. So if I could ask somebody, Beth, would you mind?
I'll pass them around. That's it.
Great, thank you, Marty. So we want to make sure we get everybody's input. If you don't have questions, the committee has gathered questions from other village residents, from ourselves, from the cloud, from fake news and real news. So we've got a little bit of everything for everyone. But before we start, I think I'd like to ask each of the candidates just to give a very short introduction of themselves, without repeating your statement of interest and qualification, a little bit of background about you and who you are and why you're running. So let's start with Katie.
Lucky. Well, hello and welcome. My name's Katie Phillip Howard. I'm sorry, I'm Katie Phillip Howard.
Yeah, let's do this.
Thank you. I reside at 3510 Taylor Street, along with my husband and 2 daughters. First and foremost, I want to thank our VMA election committee, current council members, and village manager and assistant for their hard work and dedication to local democracy, so thank you. To reiterate a little bit my candidate statement, I'm finding the future of Martin's Addition is changing with an influx of new residents, and it's now a balance of long time and newer residents. And if elected to the village council, I would offer a unique vantage point, and that I'm both a current resident and someone who fortunately grew up here. So my interest is running is to offer new ideas and a fresh perspective. I have 4 issues of interest. One, increasing public safety. Alone last night, there have been 3 car break-ins on Taylor Street, where I reside. Enhancing communication between the VMA and residents. Generating some more ideas for community events that benefit all residents, and improving some environmental concerns. And I can speak to those later, but I have had a career as a digital news editor for usatoday.com and WTOP.com, and currently I'm a creative writer for the United States Postal Service. I write correspondence on behalf of the Postmaster General of the United States. You can also address any mail concerns with me. I'll try and get it up the line. But from these positions and working with communication professionals, I can attest that social media presence is helpful, if not critical. And I think we, in Martin's Addition, could improve our social media presence, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, other channels, because I think it would open up lines of communication, and in addition to the listserv and constant contact. So lastly, the election committee received one public question for this year's candidates about the formation of a going green VMA committee. And my answer is absolutely yes, and let's go green. So thank you for attending the event tonight and taking the opportunity to meet the candidates. I, of course, would appreciate your vote and the opportunity to serve this great community that's given so much back to me. Thank you.
We're going to hold our applause to the end.
All right, my name is Katya Hill, and I'm currently
You have
serving
to speak in closer.
on the council. I have been a resident of Martin's Additions for over 10 years. I live on Raymond Street with my husband Jack, who is in the audience, and a couple of our two daughters who are 7 and 8, and 4. I'm really forgetting how old my own kids are. One of them is actually turning 4 tomorrow. She's very cute. When I ran for office 2 years ago, there were a lot of things that other residents have pointed out that we need to pay attention to and improve. And so there were things of improving our accountability and respect of residents and openness. And so we've done a whole lot of things to improve on those things, right? We have hired 2 great new staff for the village office who have...
We can actually fly to that.
We hear nothing but positive things about both Beth and Matt. And we have started openly posting RFPs for all of the contracting work that goes out. You can always find it on the internet, on our website. I just looked there today. So everything that we have contracted out is out there. So it's very open in that sense. Our budget is there, so you can always reference that. So we are more accountable, and I think that we do better with communications and with respect of residents. But there's more to be done. We have major projects underway. We've made progress. So we started the street repaving finally, but I would really like to see those projects come to completion. We expect to have street lights finally installed on our streets very soon. So hopefully by the end of May we will start the installations. And when I started on the council, this was a project that was out there for years and years, just kind of living its own life. And so I really want to see it come to fruition and actually have safer, lighter streets that are not looking like third world countries. And also, there's other things that are coming up to the council all the time, and we have a very cohesive council currently. We are able to disagree and debate and still come to a decision every time. And it's a wonderful thing not to have confrontation and to be able to solve through issues and listen to residents and adjust and come to a resolution that's best for the community. So it's been a very rewarding experience for me. I would like to ask for your vote again on May 17th. And I would like to have
May 11th.
May 11th. May 17th is the birthday of my other daughter. So I would like to ask for your vote on May 11th. Anyway, thank you. I got thrown off again by the birthdays.
Pardon?
I got thrown off twice by the birthdays of my children.
Hi, my name is Richard Krajak, and I've lived in the village of Martin's Additions since 1979. And I'd have to admit that during those early years that we didn't pay much attention to the village, that we read the newsletter, but elections were relatively unimportant. But I retired, and then I thought, well, we really ought to give back to this village. And so I started running for the council. It's wonderful. I mean, it's been, I love it. We have a good community. We have good members on the council. We generally have good residents, and I think, have conquered a lot. We've made a real difference over the years, and especially these past 2 years, of where we've moved with more flexibility, more transparency. I think that we've made the village a a better place to live. I would appreciate your vote on May 11th. Thanks.
So we got the mail delivered on time, we got street lights, and we got community unity, and we haven't started the election yet. That's fantastic. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move to like a question and response. And how we're going to do this year is we're going to ask one question of one candidate, and then the other two candidates will have a chance to either say, I agree, and if you do agree, don't opine on why you agree. You agree, and if you don't agree, I'd love to hear why you don't agree or you disagree. So with that, are there any questions from the field?
Anybody want to put one in the basket? I'll put it around the basket.
Marta's gonna be my Vanna White.
There you go.
Let me start up by okay, let's do that. Let's face down so we don't know they're coming. Has anybody had a birthday yet this year? Does anyone have a birthday in May, April, May, or June? July or August? All right, what are your birthdays?
October 12th.
October 12th.
December 19th.
And
October 17th.
all right, October 12th. Katie, you are up first. You are the lucky winner. Okay, so I'm going to take some license in the questions. I would encourage at the end of the question section to have resident input. Follow-on questions, clarification questions. If it feels like it's going beyond the scope of this night and we want to keep it on schedule because we have an 8 o'clock end time, I may ask you to take it offline and follow up with the candidate directly. But we'd like to get everybody's input as much as we can because that's what this is ultimately about. All right, so Katie. So projected financials, and Arthur Alexander's here so he can speak to this. The financials of the village show a pretty sizable surplus.
Okay.
In the coming years, I think we're currently running somewhere around $200,000 over budget for the year, and there's around $1.5 million in reserve. Most of that is because of income tax allocation from the state of Maryland, and village residents' income taxes rise, or income is rising. So it's not something that's necessarily going to go away anytime soon. And it's not the kind of thing you would want to change the tax rate or give the money back to Maryland. What would you advocate doing with surplus funds?
With the surplus
As a council member.
As a council member. Well, my number one concern is public safety.
Sorry. We need to get like more microphones.
We can afford that.
More microphones for the village office. Well, sizable surplus. Well, I think safety first and foremost. I mean, I attended the schools of many of our youngest residents. I love seeing the numbers of children walk and scoot and ride their bikes to school. This is a main thorough right here crossing Brookville. I think better lighting, signage is critical, and everyone would just benefit from that. All the dog walkers, all the runners and walkers in the neighborhood, public safety. A real concern, and I don't know if any of you have seen on the listserv, is certain streets are getting their cars broken into. Mine, one of them. Nobody took anything from my minivan because nobody would want anything from there, fortunately. But it was shuffled around. But my two neighbors, their cars and bikes were stolen. So I don't know if the village has ever weighed the possibility of certain spots of security cameras. A lot of communities have them. And that's a possibility. I also, in terms of enhancing communication, well, that wouldn't cost any money, very little. I do think maybe the website, I don't know who the current vendor is, but could use some sprucing up to be more user-friendly. And I think that I'm concerned about some environmental concerns, especially the water runoff. I know it bothers certain pockets of the neighborhood more than others, but it's certainly a real issue. And as someone who had a house, a tear down and a new house built directly behind me on Turner Lane, I'm getting many residual effects. Anytime there's any type of precipitation or saturation, I'm going to have to replace out a whole new wall. So I'm sure other residents are impacted too. And I've heard it gets worse kind of going down Turner Lane in that area. So those are some ways I see that a surplus could be hit.
Katya,
Thank you.
do you agree or disagree?
Well, I do think that the surplus is a very useful tool for a rainy day, right? So our income is currently...
No pun intended.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh. You're very good at that.
Yes, you are. So we currently have income coming in more than what we budgeted and projected, and that seems to be a trend over the last couple of years, but that hasn't always been the case. So when the recession started, we actually were in a position where we had to increase the taxes. I wasn't on the council, but at that time I understand that we did up the property tax. So having a surplus is a healthy thing for instances like that. However, what we are discussing is that starting with next year, we're looking at decreasing the property tax that we currently have, because we are running a consistent surplus and we could afford it at this point. So we'll be through our major projects by that point, and we'll know exactly how much they cost and how much we have remaining in the bank, and it will be a kind of a safer time to go down on taxes somewhat, or almost to zero on
So
property
you
taxes.
recommend a wait and see to get through the projects and determine what to do with the surplus?
Well, for this year, I believe we've passed that ordinance, right, on taxes, to keep it at the same level as we did in 2016, 2017. But the recommendation was at the last council meeting to bring it down to almost nothing with the following year.
Okay, nothing's good. Richard?
Nothing's good. I agree. I don't know what more there is. One of the issues is definitely the safety issue involves people walking on Thornapple. We're getting a lot of discussion about that and whether we should have sidewalks. We are having a report tonight by the traffic engineer who studied speeding on Thornapple and Taylor, or the number of cars, how fast they were going, and he will make some recommendations about traffic. But I think that's only part of the solution. I think we're going to have to, at some point, look at sidewalks and if those are necessary for the safety of residents, particularly kids going to school. And that could eat up a lot of money.
Okay. Citizens. Friends, any questions or follow-up? And as it relates to this is a common question the committee got a lot, was about traffic safety, the speed of cars on Thornapple, and the village's willingness to invest in the cost of sidewalks, and then the impact on the sidewalks on the aesthetics of the street and the rights of way and the owners who live on that section of Thornapple. Naomi.
So the one aspect of safety that was mentioned but not followed up on is the break-ins. And what we've had in the past is more police presence. And I wonder if you could address, each of you could address the viability of doing that, the effectiveness, why haven't we done it, whatever we can learn from that.
Right. So another follow-up to that question, we've had questions about whether we would be willing to renew the practice of hiring the Chevy Chase Village police, or I don't know. I think it was we had an annual lease renewal, and whether we'd be willing to do that again as part of this use of surplus funds. Right. So let's start with Katya first, and then we'll do Richard and Katie.
Thank you, Steve. So we used to hire the police from the Chevy Chase Village, And my understanding is that at some point, Chevy Chase Village no longer wanted to provide that service to us. So they were not interested in getting the additional funds to cover the cost of their police officers. So that option was not on the table, not because we decided to discontinue that service. We have 2 police officers that are Montgomery County police officers that work in the Bethesda office that work 10 hours a week currently, 5 each, on their off hours. And they rotate their hours, and obviously 10 hours a week is not that much. So we have looked into potentially expanding that time frame of how many hours they cover, but it's a fairly expensive proposition. So they make a good amount of money on an hourly basis, and so increasing it by a few hours a week would not necessarily make a huge impact in terms of presence, but it would make a significant impact on the budget. So it's something that we carefully have to weigh before we really proceed with that.
The 2 Montgomery County police officers that we hire now have been quite clear in their reports that if you look throughout the county of where there is more policing, more visibility, that it has little impact on the, car break-ins, on house break-ins, that it would require much more policing than we are hiring. And even then, what you're counting on is a policeman being at a place at the very time, the crime is happening. I'm intrigued with Katie's suggestion about cameras that might be really useful, because Taylor Street has been hit over and over, and I don't know if it's because the park is at the end or why, but it would seem that cameras might make a difference. I don't understand the system, but I'd be willing to look into that and on the surface be supportive.
Would you, and I'm gonna chime in occasionally, Lester Holt style. The cameras raise privacy issues, so like to address that.
Right.
And then there's a question around if there is the park to blame, because I think I've heard other residents on Turner or Taylor Street mention that may be a contributing factor. What about motion detector lights and a fence that would at least slow people from entering, or have a light come on, floodlight come on if they're out at night?
Absolutely. I think the motion lights sensors would be helpful. Better lighting, I think, translates to less likelihood of break-ins. As for Taylor Street, yes, it is unique. You have the Commerce up at one section, and then you can jump a fence and take the deer down at the other. So it's interesting, the layout. And when I propose cameras, I wouldn't say it would probably be expensive every single street, but certain intersections at least. My father, who moved to Martin's Addition in 1980, and now is a resident in South Carolina, his retiree community has them on his cul-de-sac, and people can log into it and monitor from their computers. And if they see anything suspect, they can check it in real time. It's a real safety. And as for the decreased presence of the village police, I'm sorry to hear that they didn't want to offer that service. Would it be possible to just revisit it with them?
With the Chevy Chase?
Yeah, with Chevy Chase Village.
They were pretty clear.
Okay, well, maybe down the road.
Yes. Yeah.
But I do think some more presence would be helpful. I know the statistics might say otherwise, but I think residents feel safer when they see a patrolling car every now and then. We have a lot of teleworkers now at home, people with small children that are out and about, and they're concerned about these break-ins. So I would think those are some ways to
Okay.
look into.
I gotta find some topics that they disagree on. Gotta get some sparks in this thing. So, and I apologize if I'm not taking the questions I've received verbatim. We're kind of trying to look for commonalities and threads and themes. But one of the things that's come out is communication. And we had an identical question asked, nearly identical question asked over and over again about how there is a private listserv administered by a private resident where some number of residents are not included, or at least not allowed to participate in that listserv. And would the council support some sort of a forum for residents to communicate on an official basis, not only with other residents as a group or as a community, but other residents directly or individually, and through some sort of village-sponsored forum. So the question, I think, is, and again, I'm combining sort of three of these questions, and this is for Katya to start. Actually, I'm sorry, Richard to start, because Katya started the last one. Would you support the council, as a council member, would you support the council creating a communication committee that would be mandated or charged with creating a alternative listserv that served in a more official capacity, that would be in charge of publicizing communications of the village, the Brookville market in paper form, making sure that constant contact is in use, and facilitating or researching new technology for residents to be able to reach one another, including, for example, publishing emails in the village directory. It's a long question, but it's about creating a new committee dedicated to communications.
You know, there were a group of volunteers that got together after, maybe 2 years ago, who wanted to look at the whole issue of the listserv. In particular, because people were being excluded from the listserv, and there was a feeling that it's public, and thus everybody should be entitled to use it, when in fact it is private. It's owned, in quotes, by the manager, and so the manager has apparently every right to exclude people from using the listserv. So there was thought about seeing if this committee could find a manager of the listserv so that it could be opened up to more of a public listserv, but no one wanted to serve in that capacity. And I understand that running a listserv means you do have to have a manager, and that there's a certain amount of time that has to be directed to following messages so that you don't get...
So you would be in support of a listserv with a manager to volunteer?
But not related to the village. I like the one that we have, that's the private one. I think the village has a communications vehicle that is a business vehicle that's appropriate for the village to use.
But it's a one-way communication.
It is one way. And it doesn't mean that people don't call the office with questions, but it is not, I think there's things like blogs of where, people can just use it to air their complaints or issues or their ideas. That I don't think it's a good idea for the village to be a sponsor of that.
Okay. Katie? We're
Okay.
trying to kind of keep it in
That's fine with me.
alternating order.
Okay. I think the existing listserv has run its course, and I think it's time that the VMA has a public communication makeover, honestly. I think, especially with the last election, I think there's a real disconnect between the north and south ends of the VMA. If we had some other avenues like a Facebook page or just even a Twitter account, I think it would bring a little bit more cohesion. And it's another outlet to get announcements out and more involvement. And I understand the current setup of a listserv and how one person manages it, but I do think many people feel excluded. And then when people do go on or try to put out a query, there's a lot of negativity, and we should. It's needed to be reined in for a while anyway. I just think it's time to just weigh some other options, because I think the listserv is going to go the way of the dinosaur.
So you mentioned an increased use of social media for the village. What are the main benefits of that?
Well, for one thing, everybody's on their phone all the time, and it's just a lot easier and more convenient for residents to keep up with. I've heard the main complaint is, people are busy and they're, I don't want to log in, and what is it, and what's the so I think it just gets to people quicker, and I think it's a nice presence for our community. But I also, in terms of communication, I really wanted to ask the existing council members about why the newsletter isn't printed out anymore, because while I feel like when I'm talking about social media, I'm excluding other people who maybe, aren't as savvy on social media and they miss the newsletter, and I've heard that a lot from our neighbors, and I don't know if that was a big cost savings I know you can access it here. I just wonder what the thought was, why that ended.
We can address that.
Okay.
You want me to?
Let's Katya go first. Sorry, Richard. We got to keep the process. But
Right.
We'll give you an
Sorry.
So I largely agree with Katie in terms of the fact that it's time for to kind of move into the 21st century and overhaul our communication methods. So it's true that at least the younger half of our residents are all on the phones all the time, and if we did have a Facebook page where we posted things, we would reach a large segment of our population fairly easily, and people would be able to communicate with each other, post pictures, and would bring the cohesiveness that would be a good thing for the village. Absolutely. So I'm in complete agreement and support of that idea. A little bit on why the printed out version was discontinued in terms of being delivered to each house. That was actually a huge savings, and we do still print it out, as I understand, and deliver it to folks who cannot access it via email because they don't have an email account. I understand it's not the same thing as delivering it to everybody, but it was a cost saving driver.
Okay.
But it's more, just a minute, I just want to be clear. It is also delivered to people who prefer hard copy over the email copy. And so any resident can request a hard copy to be delivered even if they have a computer.
There must be some thought or input from the field. Anyone would like to speak?
John McDonald, Summit Avenue. I posed one of the questions that you haven't gotten to relative to communication and printing more copies. There are a couple copies, I think, in the sleeve on the bulletin board. I think maybe it might be more useful to print more copies, not so many as to negate the cost savings, but put more copies in the one or two of the stores. The stores might like the foot traffic. So, and a further question, just how effective is communication with the residents? Has anybody mentioned that? What percentage of the residents responded to the poll
That's
10 months ago?
That's a good question. I'm going to let Katya respond to that, because I think I'm going to let Katya respond because she organized the surveys.
Right.
But I want to make sure, does anyone else have any other questions? I don't want to, raise your hand, by the way, don't be shy. Everyone does.
Thanks, Steve. So, 2 years ago when we were running, we wanted to improve communications. So within the first 2 months of me joining the council, we initiated a village-wide survey that we do on a yearly basis. So we do have a feedback mechanism that we can track the responses on. How well is the office doing? How fast is the council responding to residents? How fast is the office responding to residents? What services do residents want to see? We want to keep the questions consistent year over year to see trends and to really give an opportunity to residents to voice their concerns. And so we can plan the work for the year, frankly, to try to feed the feedback that we got from the residents off of the survey. In terms of how many responses we receive, it is about a quarter of the residents, which is actually a pretty good number if you compare to what surveys normally get. So there's a pretty good engagement from the community on that. More people open it than complete it, which is also normal, but about a quarter.
Okay. And a quarter, there are, to give some context to that, there's about 620, give or take, registered voters. That probably means there's about 1,000 residents, well, maybe 1,200 residents in the village. So of the registered voters, you're getting about 150, give or take. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Okay. Changing topics a little bit, and I'm going to ask that everybody try to limit their responses to 3 minutes, which is going to be a challenge for some.
That'd be you.
But this relates to the charter.
Sand thing.
Katya and Richard probably have an advantage because you've been living the charter over the last couple of over your term. Richard, you were I believe one of the initial authors of the charter.
No.
You had some input in the charter in the early days. Well, you've lived here a long time.
I've lived here a long time, yes. But my birthday's in October.
And Katie, I don't know whether you have studied the charter in any great depth, but there are the charter itself and then the ordinances that go with it. There's a lot of debate about overhauling or at least rewriting some portions of it to make it clearer, particularly around the building code that was just overhauled in the last few years, and other areas. So let's take it to 4 minutes because I think this is important and I think it's going to raise other issues. Because I'd like to save time for a speed round of questions that are going to be yes or no answers. We're going to hold you to them. But if you can give me, and we're going to start with Katya, if you can give me the areas of focus that you as a council member would encourage the council to focus on overhauling the charter in the next term.
Thank you. So this year we've actually gone through our charter in heavy detail with a fine-tooth comb and made some clarifying changes to it. That each change was discussed in the open meetings and it was voted on and either approved or not. It was very good discussion. It was open for resident comments all of these points. We also have obviously ordinances that accompany it that are easier.
Yeah, when I speak, I'm speaking collectively of the entire body.
Okay. So it's a living document, right? So the needs of the village change year to year. And so the village is not very large. A lot of times when there's an issue that arises, if it's a one-time issue, it may not be worth going in and changing all of the rules and taking the 6 months to do it if you are not expecting to see it ever again. If we do see it twice, we generally try to go back and really figure out what the confusion is and make the change. I think that's an effective process. I think that changing it after each individual time would be overkill, and not changing it after a couple of instances of confusion would also be oversight. So I think that the way that the council works today is effective.
You have 2 more minutes. Go ahead.
I finished.
All right, now let me do a follow-up. Do you feel because this is not a sentiment that's shared across the entire community. One of the things that I think all of you would agree is that we should all be looking for ways to make the community more unified.
Absolutely.
What would you do differently to solicit input? Not just holding public hearings, which is required by Maryland law, but what else would you do as a council member to encourage more open debate and input from the entire village about the ordinances and the charter itself?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to the involvement from residents, right? So if we improve communication methods and residents are more involved, they are likely to voice their opinions on various aspects of what's being considered at this point. So if we overhaul our communication methods and actually get more involvement than we do today, I'm hoping that will naturally promote and feedback from residents on the various issues.
Katie?
Well, as for the charter and ordinance, I can tell you, having worked in radio, everyone is tuned into WIIFM. That's what's in it for me. So people don't look at it till it concerns them. And I know I've run into that. Not this year, we didn't have any snow, but last year when we had the major snow, all of a sudden I walk out in front of my house and there's, you know, the certified Martin's edition note saying don't park here, and you know, the number, the ordinance, and I've never been done before, so I'm confused and scratching my head. I go in and I look it up on the website, but I did a lot of digging, and sure enough, I found, no, they're right. That's that at that intersection. And of course, they stored the snow there for 8 weeks until it melted, but they're in the right, and I looked it up, but it didn't really affect me until that moment. So I think that a lot of residents feel that way, and it's always great to do, what was it, Al Gore's take the legalese out of government, and he had that initiative. But just to get the gobbledygook and the legalese out, to clear the English in these ordinances would be helpful. But maybe, you know, if we can't reinvent the wheel on it, maybe adding just more of a clear, like, FAQ section that comes up for residents, like building permits. A lot of people want to enhance their houses and make changes. Maybe they have some general questions, and you can kind of, you know, play devil's advocate, come up with some ideas, and then say, consult this, go to see here, go to this ordinance, until we can make it clear.
Don't tell Ron Bull about getting rid of the legalese.
Well, the lawyers do, I know.
There's students there.
Richard?
I agree.
With?
No, I think that it's, first place, the charter, we hired people 2 years ago to come in and go through the charter and the ordinances to find the areas where there is disagreement between the two. And we have not yet opened the charter to make those changes because it's quite an involved process. On the ordinances, we have moved ahead, I feel, in terms of clarifying them. They are, as has been said, living documents. When we find that the language is confusing to homeowners, to residents, that we try to go in and address that confusion. Thank me for under 3 minutes.
What is the survey says? Is that true? Do people feel like they've got input? And don't speak for yourself necessarily, speak for your neighbors and the community. Anybody? Newcomers alike? You're sort of new.
Yeah.
New enough.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit.
Let everybody know who you are.
I'm Lauren Beal. I'm on Delfield Street. I'm curious, you know, you mentioned you haven't yet opened the charter up. At past council meetings, I've heard you mentioning that, you know, we're going to be opening the charter up. I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about what does that mean? What does that process look like? Is there going to be, I mean, that seems like a very important thing And it seems like, from many council meetings that I attend, there's one or two people in the audience. And I think if there's something that sort of has a lot of gravity is going to happen, I'm curious, what are the methods that each of you would use to make sure that it isn't just one or two people? It's something that's as big as opening a charter. I mean, that sounds important. So getting people out in that way.
Richard, she was looking at you the whole time.
Right. It is complicated, but I can't remember the process, whether we have to have a certain number of the residents have to be signatories to do that, plus the residents have to vote on making the changes to the charter, unlike the ordinances that can be done at a council meeting. The changes that we would propose in the charter are mainly changes that would change words so they would be equivalent to the words that are used in the ordinances. For instance, the word bylaws is used in the charter, and we don't have bylaws. We have ordinances. And so it would be a case of changing those words. It's a big deal only that it would align, the charter with what the ordinance are saying. It is incredibly boring legal work, to be honest.
That requires the vote of all your residents.
Well,
so
yeah.
You're going to have to make it interesting.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the riveting legal work that most of us have come to enjoy. Okay, this is a question I think that has come up. We sort of had three really main topics, and we didn't want to just focus on those, but they were the public safety issue, which we want to come back to. There was around the communication in the village, and it was around kind of remaining divisions in unity, which, to everyone's credit, I think, and I'm speaking on behalf of all the other committee members, all of it was in the hope of, we have to find ways to eliminate whatever rifts exist, whether they're perception or reality is unclear. But there's a feeling there that some of these things still exist. And there was an unfortunate incident last week where there was a hoax, a prank, something in that context where somebody submitted and nominated 41 residents of the village without their permission. And and the elections committee has a duty to investigate and validate each one of those nominations, and spent hours doing so. Marty gave up several billable hours of intoxicating legal work, and just aside from the disrespect it showed to the volunteers who serve on the committee, who serve on the elections committee, or the council and the elections committee, it again exposed this sort of rift that is out there. And again, whether that's perception or reality depends on the individual. As council member, what would you support the council doing to heal, identify, repair, ignore? How would you deal and address the perceived rifts? And who's a Sagittarius?
I am.
All right, we're gonna do
I'm a Libra.
Thank you. So that's a little bit of a tough one, right? Because we definitely want to heal the wounds and close the rift and make sure that everybody is feeling like they're part of the same community and are appreciated and are involved. We've tried our best to encourage better feelings across the village. So we had the wonderful centennial celebration that a lot of people participated in, no matter which side of the rift they're on, right? We are starting with the new wine tasting event that will be for adults early in the summer, because we already have kid-centered events, so that was the thought process there. So I think that events like that are important, and that was actually something that was listed on the survey as something that people are interested in: involvement, community events, opportunities to talk to my neighbors, etc. And then there's the aspect of looking at our communication plan that we have in place. So we talked about the listserv, updating that, maybe bringing it into the 21st century, maybe tapping into Facebook, maybe doing something different, but new and exciting, and hopefully raising involvement in the community that way. I think if people talk to each other more, they will realize that we're all living in the same community and really want the same things, right? It's when you're stuck in your circle that you kind of stew in maybe some negative thoughts. But at the end of the day, I think increasing involvement is the answer here. Although that's not something that's solved overnight. So.
Nope, we're going Richard, and we're going to let Katie close it out. Only order.
I think that we've made significant progress in trying to identify people to participate in the committees, that we have gone to all of the residents in an attempt to see balance from residents who in the past weren't as excited about the changes that have been made by the council. But I think there is difficulty too when, for instance, the listserv isn't available to everybody, is sort of a constant poke in the eye, so to speak. And, perhaps we can do something in order to change that as one small step.
Katie?
Thank you. This might sound trivial, but seasonal events, once a season, it benefits me. I live on Taylor Street, but we do a lot of things centralized here. We use Shepherd Park and Le Bar. Maybe we should encourage different streets to open up and maybe have community gatherings, like for a spring fling at this home, or I don't know. But maybe more events advertised like a book club, and I don't know what the use of the village office would be for those types of events, community events in the sort. And I'm telling you, back to social media. Social media is social. I mean, the fact that you had a real presence, someone can post something as, oh, look at my new addition on my home. Oh, I like it. Oh, we're friends now. So I just think there really was a division. I experienced it last time when I campaigned in the last election between the North and South End, and it was really a surprise to me. But maybe I need to get out more, and that therein lies the problem. So I think more events that appeal to a range of people. We do a lot of things for the young children, which is nice. The Halloween party. I would propose also maybe a spring egg roll. Those seems to be popular, but also that appeals to other generations and residents. I think you can never do that enough.
Great. Are there comments or questions? There are. There's one, at least one. Activity?
Did you want to? No, thank you.
You want to identify
I'm one of the
yourself?
older ones. Yes. No, we had an open house about a month ago. Lauren's wonderful home, and she was a delightful host. And that was a lovely event, and one of the things that occurred was there were posters up where you could write suggestions for the village, and I was just wondering whether those have been looked at by anyone, or anybody's thinking about implementing any of them. And I'd also like to know, why are some people excluded from the listserv? That seems extremely bizarre. How does that happen?
Question on just a second.
Yes, thank you, Susan. And
Can you say the name, please?
in terms of the list, it was wonderful. to have the poster board up where people, and we saved all the suggestions from people and kind of categorized them. And one of the things that the election committee is sponsoring, which is new this year on May 11th, is in addition to our election table and all the great community groups, we're going to have a volunteer table. And they're going to be clipboards. And people can sign up if they're interested in working like on a green VMA committee, because a number of people suggested that. Or a kids activity committee, or a communications committee. Now, to be a committee, you have to actually have a group of residents get together and put a proposal to the council, and then the council can create the committee. But what we need is for people to get together. So we're following up. I have all the lists, I have all the suggestions, and I have people's names. You're all forward. Thank you all.
41 names.
Yeah, thank you all.
As it relates to your question about the listserv, I can't speculate about what the reasons are that people are excluded. That the listserv manager has decided to exclude certain people based on comments, behavior, language, or views. And that's I don't. It's a public listserv, and therefore there's nothing to comment on.
It's a private.
I'm sorry, it's a private listserv. Thank you, Naomi. I was going to ask you guys about the hoax and what we think we should do about it, but I think, frankly, we're not going to dignify it. It was a stupid prank.
Right.
All right.
Oh, well.
I'm going to ask a series of questions, and there's only two answers, yes or no. If you can abstain too, I guess. So I'll let you abstain. Yes or abstain. Okay? And then we're going to give everybody an opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement, and then final questions from the field if that works for everyone. In no order. These are just things that people have asked, and I want to make sure they get asked. We're just going to go left to right. So Katie, would you support the council forming a green committee?
Yes, absolutely, go green.
All right. Katya, would you support the creation of a green committee? The council supporting a formal green committee to support green spaces and green ways of living and green lifestyle and green education
Yes.
in the village? All right, Richard, would you?
Yes.
But everybody support oxygen in the air.
No.
Would you support, Katie, Katya, actually we're going to start here, we're going to do the snake method. Richard, would you support the use of VMA funds to support a weekly farmer's market using La Ferme's parking lot? No other rear parking lot here.
I would abstain.
You abstain.
Too many legal questions.
Katya, this is opening. This is open. Yes or
Too
no?
many questions, so I have to abstain.
Okay, Katie?
I say yes.
Yes.
We're talking about bringing a community together. A farmer's market brings a community together. I think those issues would sort themselves out. We have plenty of lawyers. We can ask them about it in the neighborhood.
Very good. Would you support Katya, then Katie, then Richard? Do you support, and and I'm asking this because as a council member and as a member of the VMA Council, the council has the ability to influence or at least participate in public discussion. Do you support, and I'm going to put these together, development at Chevy Chase Lake and the Purple Line? Katya, yes or no?
I prefer the Green Committee question.
That was easy.
I abstained.
2 abstains. Okay, you only get 3 abstains. So you get the-
All right.
Oh, it's like timeout.
Katie.
Actually, I have to say yes and no. I mean, no, personally, I am not
As
in
a
favor
council member, would you
as a
support
runner, but yes, it benefits the community and it's going to enhance the community.
So to be clear, as a council member, you would support an official position the council would take in support of development at Chevy Chase Lake and the Purple Line?
Yes, because I think it's inevitable it's happening. So
Okay.
yes.
Richard?
No.
Yes, abstain, no. Everybody taking minutes? We got minutes, we're definitely going to hold, no. No new taxes. Okay, would you support Richard? I'm sorry for going out of order, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Would you support additional funding to hire Chevy Chase Village Police or additional Montgomery County Police patrols? This is all predicated that the traffic,
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
3 yeses. Would you, Katya, Richard, Katie, Would you support VMA funds, assuming the traffic consultant report supports a sidewalk, ignoring cost and ignoring aesthetics and ignoring property issues? Would you support purely on cost, purely on the dollars? Would you support building a sidewalk in Thorn Apple Street?
Purely on the dollars?
Yes.
Yes.
Katie?
I was going to say, can you come back to me? No.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
3 yeses. You can thank me later, people of Thorn Apple. That's a joke. Okay, I think what I want to be sensitive to the time, and I want to be sensitive to our audience to ask questions.
Hey Joe, how you doing?
What I think makes the most sense is to have everyone offer a 2-minute closing argument and take Q&A questions that are directly only to that candidate. So we'll do one with Q&A, the next candidate Q&A, and the final candidate with Q&A. And I have a number behind my back. What has it got to? 2 out of 10. It's 3. Very much.
So, thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's actually absolutely great to see that many residents come out. It's not nearly as much of a heated election as it was last time, and still there's so much interest, which is wonderful to see. I believe that the council as it is today is very effective, and it's been an extremely rewarding experience for me to work on the council, and I would like to have an opportunity for another 2 years to finish the projects that we have started and continue contributing my energy to the council. So thank you for coming out, and I ask for your vote.
Richard is the other incumbent.
It has been a wonderful 2 years, and we have many things going for us.
I'm sorry. Against my own. Let's take questions for Katya. I told my wife I get 3 mistakes a year. That's like my second mistake.
I abstain.
For Katya, questions, anything that you didn't address? Anything at all? Marty?
Katya, what did you think of the hoax with the 41 votes?
It was horrible and such a waste of time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Richard, I apologize.
Do I start over or finish the sentence?
No, you can start over.
I've really enjoyed being on the council, and I think we've done a lot that's been very constructive over this last 2 years. And there's a lot yet to be done, and I'd like to stay on the council and to be able to help finish that work with members that are absolutely wonderful and a community that's great to work for. Thank you.
Questions for Richard? Don't be shy. Look, the MC is a volunteer. You kind of get what you pay for. So, all right, Naomi.
I actually just want to make a comment that I remember now, 2 years ago when I first met Katya in my neighbor's patio, and I heard why she's running. And it was the first time I got involved in the village after living here for over 30 years. I'm true confession. This is that's what gave me a reason to get involved, was the need, where I saw the need to upgrade things, to fix things, to open up and the community. And this is a wonderful reminder of how much it has opened up.
Are you announcing your candidacy?
I'm announcing my gratitude.
Kate.
Well, again, I want to thank the existing council and our village manager and Beth. And while I thank you for your hard work and dedication, I do think there's always room for improvement. some more, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and revisiting some issues that have been brought up by residents that have kind of fallen by the wayside. For example, if I may, Alyssa Bean, right here, had a wonderful suggestion, was it 2 years ago, about improving Shepherd Park, because we have a lot of bus and walkers that slide down the hill, and we were looking at maybe talking with the Parks Department about putting in some sort of a structure or path to improve that safety concern. It's things like that we should be hearing from more residents, and I'd like to speak to those residents. Also, I really feel we need to improve our communication, and there's a couple of examples. I think it's great we're paving our roads finally, but one example I can tell you personally, in the winter when A.B. Veers was taking over Taylor Street, there were delays because of weather, and I understand that, but our bus, the Rosemary Hills bus, which many of the kids in this neighborhood attend and ride, comes down Taylor Street, and the A.B. Veers workers were yelling at her, telling her she couldn't because they had just paved, and this is, a veteran MCPS worker, and she gets our kids home safely every day, and they're yelling at her, and they're telling her to just drop our kindergartners and second graders down at the end of the street, which is a panic for parents and caregivers. If we had social media, if we had a tweet, we could say, look, there's a delay. You might be impacted. And I think we need to be more in touch with our schools and beyond our community. And I would like to be that candidate. And I hope that you vote for me. And thank you for coming. And I hope you get home safely.
So apparently our convertible is open right now, which is why my husband was panicking and ran out. So I'm really sorry.
So we're going to have quick pause. Everybody has open windows. Please feel free to go out and close them.
Our question for Kate. Kate, you mentioned many times use of social media, FaceTime, or Facebook and Twitter. What I want to know is these are both unmoderated, as I understand. Do we tend to see it getting overloaded with negative comments or dominated by single individuals? Like you mentioned, I just put up this addition on my house. Could somebody say, what an eyesore, why'd you ever do something like that? And rather than increase the good feeling, would have the opposite effect.
Well, I can answer that because unlike the listserv, it's more anonymous, where Facebook, you have a better idea of who you're dealing with. I think people will be much more civil on Facebook.
Is there an experience for that? Do we find that as a general experience?
Yes, in general, and someone would be monitoring the Facebook page. There's different options that Facebook offers, but it's a lot more inclusive than, say, the listserv. Because many people have Facebook pages, it's just about liking, and you decide the privacy concerns. And I'm sure people will be more civil and congenial on it because it's not as much of a screen. You can go in and see who's liking your page, and so it limits that. And I don't think that would be a concern. Actually, I think it would be an enhancement.
Are there any other questions for Kate?
Well, this is a general question.
All right, general questions are okay.
Hi, my name is Liz. I'm a relatively new resident, so I apologize if this question is a little bit ignorant. I am on Chestnut Street. I live across the street from Martin. So I'm definitely involved. So, my question is, I'm a mom of young kids, and it's hard for me to get to these meetings at 7 o'clock at night when my kids go to bed, and I think a lot of my friends are young parents. Would you guys be open to having these kind of events at a time that we more convenient, maybe on a weekend, on a Sunday afternoon? You said we have a lot of events for kids. I know that we have one. And that's that time that I don't know that I've seen any other council members there. So I'm looking for a time that I can get involved that's not 7 o'clock at night on a weekday. Maybe like a weekend event, or a wine tasting would be great, or something. An egg roll where I can see the council members and I can understand what the issues are at a different time than a weekday.
So would you support allowing kids to the council meeting? Would like to answer that.
So we are having a wine tasting. We are having a wine tasting on June 11th at 3 o'clock on Sunday, without children, and council members present. So that would be an opportunity.
But that's excluding kids again. So people who have kids would have to get a babysitter.
Right.
But I'm here tonight with a babysitter.
Right.
That's hard for a lot of other families.
Yes.
Right. No, that is, again, it's hard to kind of capture all these things in a forum, but I know there's been a lot of discussion from the existing council, from other council members, from interested candidates, certainly in the elections committee that I serve on, about having more family friendly. I mean, it's we can have face painting and music and an open bar. We can combine the two. And I think the message you're going to hear over and over again is that all these things are open for encouragement, people to get involved. So yeah, speaking on behalf of, I think, the whole village. Yes.
I'm George from Thornapple. Trying to get people together, especially family. We've been here about 6 years. Has Martha's Division ever had a garden walks? Because I remember the other part of Chevy Chase having one that was put together last year. Extremely well attended. Everybody said, God, why don't communities do this? But that's open for the elderly.
You want to volunteer for the committee for that?
Well,
Please do. It's a big,
my name is Jeff.
Being very serious. Being very serious.
And let the record show his name is George, and he has just volunteered in the chair. So, you made up Jeff. That's a great idea, and I think it dovetails well with some of the ideas that have come out of tonight. But it's raining, so I didn't feel the need to end it right at 8 o'clock.
We have to have a council meeting
There is a council meeting, so I'm going to wrap this up. First of all, I thank everybody for coming out tonight. Without you, there's really no council, and I think that a lot of you are going to have follow-up questions, and I would encourage everybody to have those questions and email the candidates, take them down to a bar for a drink. Whatever way you can express your interest in the community, I think is appreciated. So thank you to everybody on behalf of the Elections Committee. But most importantly, thank you to Katie, Kathy, and Richard, who have either served or are willing to serve again, or hoping to serve on the council, which is an extraordinary amount of dedication. Not necessarily time, but dedication and mind share to this community, and it's a volunteer position. So let's show our appreciation by voting. And by getting the neighbors to vote, and by getting everybody in the village to vote.
When is the vote?
It's Thursday, May 11th.
May 11th.
5 to 8. There's also absentee ballots available if you can't be here in person.
Free icing.
And free ice cream. And free wine.
And bring
So
your
it's kind of
kids.
for the kids.
Bring your kids.
And bring the kids.
Yes.
Kids love it.
5 to 8.
With the council's annual meeting following, where the budget for the year is approved.
Kids don't necessarily love that.